Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, greetings. Hi, welcome to Ham Radio Fun. I'm Joel Baldwin, AI6DG. This is video number 1 and the first in a series on the Hardrock-500 amplifier kit. We're going to start in this video with a review of what it is and what you get, and in preceding subsequent videos we'll go through building it. What is the Hardrock-500? Well, this is it. It is a product designed by Jim Vatek on the Hobby PCB website. They have a wide range of products. The 500 is actually the big daddy of another product that they've sold for a while, the Hardrock-50. This is a 50-watt HF amplifier, 6 through 160 meters. It has room in it for several options. You can have a built-in antenna tuner that fits inside it, and there's also a QSK module so that you don't have as much clacking of relays. And there is also a plug-in accessory board to let you more easily interface to KX2s and 3s. This was a very successful product, and they eventually decided to expand the product line and came up with the 500. Designed it, and it just fairly recently came out. It also has several accessories or add-ons. Due to the legal aspects, they cannot sell a complete kit of it in one part because it does 5 in, 50 watts, 500 watts out, and that's in excess of the 15 dB. So you're buying a support kit. In addition to this, to get a complete kit, you have to also buy the amplifier board. And the recommended board for this is from RF Power Tools. It's well integrated in terms of being able to buy. You can go to Hobby PCB and get both the amplifier board, add it to your cart, and the Hardrock-500 amplifier support kit. Add both of those to your cart, and you have a complete amplifier. If you want to add the antenna tuner, that's another option. Add that to your cart, and you have it maxed out and a very cool product. Hobby PCB and their products are well known for their support. As part of that, they have a Google document site to support the product. As well as the homepage of that has links to Hobby PCB, to the pages for the individual products. There's a link to a YouTube video for part of the AC wiring harness. You have an assembly checklist, an assembly manual, and operating instructions for the main unit. For the antenna tuner, you have an assembly manual and a link to the latest firmware. There's software available so that you can remotely control it through the USB. The latest firmware for the 500. There is forums available, support forums. I guess now you have to go to the Google link itself, and it's not embedded on here. FAQ, some schematics, test data in terms of the harmonics of the kit and the linearity. Toroid guy does wind the toroids. If you're not into winding toroids, you can buy them from Toroid Guy pre-made. And a nice set of pictures of the completed amplifier looking at the top side and the back side. I mentioned forums. There is a forum for support for both the 500 and the 50, if that's more to your liking. And I mentioned documentation a moment ago. There is a significant amount of documentation. You have to print it out yourself, but this is how much you can get. There's quite a bit. There's a checklist of the various boards you're assembling and the steps to assemble them. So that you can check off as you complete things and know that that's been done. There's an operating instruction manual that goes through the hookup and operating of it. There's, or if you get the optional antenna tuner, there's assembly instructions for that. And then the assembly instructions of the main unit. Let's go through those instructions and look at what you get for that assembly. Starts with simple stuff, what the product is, specs on it, index, some general warnings and cautions, assembly instructions, what you need, tools, and then a separate section for each board that's listing the parts with pictures and how many of them so that you can do your inventory. So the low pass board, power supply board. Notice it's mostly hardware. The low pass board, you've got the toroids and the wire to do the toroids. The power supply board, you've got a couple of caps you've got to add. Hardware, almost every board's going to have matching hardware to mount it. And cables, power cables, and more power cables. And those are pre-made, so you don't have to cut them. You don't have to put the ends on. There's a lot that's been done for you. Rear panel assembly board, again, mostly hardware. Pre-made cable. Power connector, fans, RF connectors, fan. Front panel. This has got a fair amount of soldering because it's got headers for the two displays and the Arduino controller. So this board has a fair amount of soldering actually, although not terribly difficult. The chassis pack, it's all hardware, a couple of pre-made ribbon cables, a couple of power cables. Coaxes. One thing you commonly do with the coaxes is prep the ends so that they go into terminal strips. A large item inventory. You've got 3 power supplies, two side panels on each side, so 4 total, front, back, top, and bottom, and a couple of chassis panels inside. Heatsink, big monster copper heat spreader. You'll see these in a moment, all of these. And boards. And large portions of the boards are already made for you. All surface mount components are already added. And most components are already on the board. So it's largely you putting things together. It's largely assembly, not as much soldering as you might expect. And then it goes into the description of construction for the first board. But first, I mentioned the RF board. That's a separate product. This guy. Let's take a quick look at the instructions, because those instructions for assembling this are from RF Power Tools, but they've been included in this manual. So let's take a quick look at that. And one moment as I dig through. Trying to find the start of this. Here we go. Sorry about that. Let's pull out the board so you can see it. As each assembly section is, it starts out with a parts list. And this is the board. As I stated earlier, most components are pre-installed on it. And in this case, it comes with what hasn't been already installed. This board, you have a fair amount of toroid winding. So we've got a toroid there, a couple of small toroids in here, and a cap, and some wire and coax that's used in the winding of the toroids, and 2 of these power transistors that would go here and here. And the instructions are going through soldering a toroid to board, winding it, winding another toroid. Good pictures. I would consider these excellent assembly instructions. Lots of pictures. Attaching it to the board, preparing the ends of coax. This is one of the boards that worries me the most about construction, not having done this yet, because this does take some soldering skills for some of this attaching of components onto the board. So this is not going to be the first board I build. So also, I got the optional antenna tuner. And here's the board. Again, majority of components are already on board. And one nice thing about this is all the toroids are already wound. But this one, you don't have to wind them. They're already wound, the enamel stripped off and tinned. So this is very simple compared to some of the other boards. Hardware, ribbon cable, and it's actually a piece of wire that's used in one of the toroids. So now we can go back up here and go into the regular main path of construction. And it's a low-pass assembly board. Here's the board. The main work you're doing for assembly on this board, since all of these components are already installed, including these capacitors, only thing that you're building on this board is winding the toroids and assembling them. So it comes with a bag of some hardware for mounting it and a whole bunch of toroids, and then the wire. So the major task for this board winding the toroids and soldering them on. Starts with a picture of the board front and back. Gives a good discussion about how to wind the toroids, how to count them. And then for each toroid, it tells you the length of the wire to cut off, how many turns, a picture so you know what it's supposed to look like when you're done, and where it goes. And that's done for each toroid in turn. All the way to the last two. That was actually the SWR, forward and reverse power sensing. Then you mount it to a board, one of the internal chassis boards. With the hardware that's provided. The next board is the power supply board. And again, there's the board. Most of the components are already there. And with that, you get the two caps that need to be soldered on, a bag of pre-made cable stuff for the power distribution, some more pre-made cables, and more hardware to mount that power supply board. So we're going through mounting those two caps, putting them onto, doing some hardware onto the panel. Mounting the power supplies. And here are the power supplies. Comes with 3 of them. This is an example of how well the packing was. You see how much foam there was in this box, even though this is inside another box. These are some fans that will get used later. So the power supplies, the AC power, the power board gets mounted on the chassis. There's actually a video about part of this section where you're doing the cabling with all of this. So this is not electrical soldering, or this is a straight mechanical assembly. And then we've got the rear board, or the rear panel assembly. And here's the board. And the components that come with it. Bag of hardware. Like I said, everyone's got some hardware. RF connectors, and you can actually see where those get mounted. Here, here, and here. AC ground cable and AC connector. So the picture of the board. This is actually where those fans we just saw. This is where they're getting mounted and soldered to the board, the power leads. And then you're getting then assembling it onto the rear panel. This. Hooking up AC. fan, another fan. There's a big fan that comes with it. And then we get to the front panel assembly. This is where you get to some fun with the headers. All of these pads are going to have a header that goes in them, and pins that need to be soldered there. So this is a lot of soldering, but it's easy soldering. What I would consider easy soldering anyway. So the components that comes with it is, like I said, headers. We've got all of these headers. We've got a bag here with a whole bunch more headers and some hardware, power switch. This is the Arduino board that gets mounted and controls the main unit. And it's been pre-programmed with some basic stuff. That's why this corner is torn off, so that they could get to the connector to program it. And then we've got the two displays. It's too well wrapped up, you can't really tell what it is, but this is one of the displays. And then here's the other one. And that's what we're doing if you go through the instructions, is it's talking about mounting the header pins, soldering them in, header pins, soldering them in so that the display board and the Arduino board are both mounted. The two displays and the Arduino were mounted on. And then it goes into mounting all of that onto the front panel board. And then adding it to then for the final assembly, you're putting the two halves that we've created together into the front panels and starting to do cabling. As you can see, lots of pictures. Wiring harness. Here's an example of the coax ends that you're making. You do this multiple times through this, where basically you strip back the shield, twist it together, make a little lead, and then get screwed into terminal strips. Here they're starting to deal with the heatsink. So, warning, sharp edges. This is the heatsink. This is what the RF board and its power transistors get screwed to. But they get screwed first to this. This comes with, and it's a big honkin' heavy chunk of copper. This is the heat spreader that the power transistors get bolted to, and then this gets bolted to the power supply, although it's insulated by a piece of this thermal padding. So when they're discussion about power transistors and bolting them to the heat spreader and then soldering it to the RF board. Here's an example of where we're doing RF coax cables with the terminal strip. That's the ends I was talking about. One neat thing is you don't to adjust the bias. It's built in. You don't need to pull out a current meter. So when you're setting the bias on the paratransistors, it's all through the front panel. Nope, there's a pot. Okay, so you do turn a pot, but you read it off of the front panel. And back to here, I already showed you this. And this. So the kit's a bit expensive. I think for what you get, it's a very small amplifier. It comes well packed. All the pieces were individually wrapped. Lots of paper and bubble wrap and foam. It comes with everything you need. Here's one of the side panels. So you've got two of these on each side. Front and bottom panels. I haven't shown you these yet. This is part of the chassis kit. And it's hardware, more hardware again. Heatsink compound. These circular things are the feet for the case. And some more pre-made ribbon cables and coax and cables. So it's just a whole bunch of parts. In terms of difficulty, I would say advanced intermediate, somewhere in there. It's not super difficult. You're not doing a whole bunch of surface mount stuff. But it is a complex kit. You have a lot of parts. One of the most important things about successfully building it is to carefully read the instructions. Make sure that you've read the instructions several times before you do each step. But I'm excited. I'm looking forward to building it and having a complete product. It's a very small in physical size 500 watt amplifier. So let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll put links in the description for the subsequent construction steps when I get there. And you have a good night, good day. See you around.